What's up guys, Aiden here and I'm back with a new screencast. So I've been super busy lately. I've been producing a Parasite course, I've got another one in the recordings and I've been busy working with clients, but I'm gonna try to get these screencasts back on the regular schedule. And today we're gonna focus on the async and the await keywords that's been made available for us out of the box since Node 7.5 or 7.6. And today we're going to take a look at how we used to do things asynchronously, or at least kind of asynchronously, with promises, and we're going to see how we can get much cleaner code with better readability and maintainability by using async and await. So we're going to start off by doing things as we used to with promises, and then we're going to try to convert those samples to the new way of using async and await. And if you're a C# developer like I am, you'll probably recognize the thinking behind this, because async and await has been available for a while in C#. But if you've been in the JavaScript world, this will probably be some new things you're going to need to learn about and adapt. But we're going to see here today that it really makes life a lot easier for us by using these new keywords instead. So let's get right to it. So let's start by declaring a function that will return a promise in the old-fashioned way, and then let's see how we can improve this code by adding the async and the await keywords. So let's go ahead and declare a function. Let's call it fetch. And we're not really gonna go ahead and get something from the internet now, but imagine we do. Let's get some JSON data back. So we're just gonna return a new promise here. And a promise will take two arguments. It will take a resolve argument and a reject argument. And we're just gonna code a happy float to begin with, and just begin with that and see where this leads us. So let's just fix this parenthesis error here. And we're just gonna simply resolve a result here. Let's resolve some JSON data. So you have to use your imagination and pretend that this actually does an HTTP call that could potentially go wrong. So let's just return here an object. Let's give it a text property, and just return some awesome text, right? And the usual way we would go about this would be to call this function. Let's just first make sure that this works, we don't get any errors. And it seems to work, but we don't see any output, right? That's because we aren't actually printing anything to the console yet. So the usual way when we get a promise, we probably go ahead and chain a success method that will run if everything goes good, which will be the result. And let's just log this. Let's just log result. And in our case, we know that it's JSON data, so we could just go ahead also and parse this data. And the reason why I'm doing this is to demo how this gets a bit difficult when this method actually throws something. So this is the happy flow, everything works, right? So let's just go ahead and run this now. And we can see that we got our JSON data, which is great. And if we were to reject this promise instead, whoops, something went wrong. If we reject it instead, now first of all, we don't chain the catch method here. So we're gonna need to do that, and we can see that we got an unhandled promise rejection, and we're gonna need to chain up the catch method here. So let's go ahead and do that really quick and see when we get an error. Let's log that error as well. Right, and let's come down here and run this now instead. And we got that something went wrong. So far there's nothing new here. This is kind of the way that we're used to writing our JavaScript code. And one thing I actually got wrong. I thought I could just go ahead and mark this method as an async method and then do an await here. For instance, await the result. So let result equal that. Let's comment this out. So this isn't really possible. You can't await outside the scope of a function. So we're gonna need to be able to demo this. We're gonna need to wrap our program up in a new method that will do the awaiting for us. So let's just declare a new method here, foo, and let's not make it async to begin with. We're just gonna go ahead and do the same thing we did out here, but we're gonna do it in this method instead. And now we'll be able to change this around. I'm actually trying to learn to code without the semicolons just to get a feeling for if it's something I can live with. So you'll probably see me writing semicolons sometimes, and sometimes I don't, and that's because I'm in this transitioning period. So I don't know what I feel about it, but I think I'm getting more and more used to not using semicolons. So I mean, why should we add them if the compiler doesn't need them? It just pollutes our code, really. And now instead of calling fetch here, we can go ahead and call foo. And this should give us the same result. Let's get rid of this reject for now. We're gonna visit that later again. And now just make sure everything works. We still got our JSON data, and we are hitting the success method and console logging it by passing the result to the JSON parse method. All right, so how can we improve the readability of this code? So first of all, I've already done this. I went ahead and marked this method as an async method. And by doing so, I can easily, instead of chaining these methods here, we can go ahead and declare a variable that will be our result. And we can await this guy instead. And we can only do this within an async method itself. So foo will be an async method which will call await on another async method which returns a promise. So now instead of chaining a success function and an error function onto this promise we get back here, we can just await the result. And now console log this. We can do the same thing here. JSON parse and get the result. And just parse the result. Let's actually call the log method. And now run this application. And we can see we still get our data back. And for me, the biggest win here is that we don't need to nest our code, because nesting our code really makes it ugly and not so maintainable and not very easy to read. So you can imagine if we were to do several calls to fetch here. Let's call these different things. And we don't want to call result 2 and 3 unless result, the first call, went right. Then we need to chain the then, a couple of then calls, and catch the errors separately for each call. And this gets really messy. And this way we can just go ahead and call our methods here. And we can see that we'll get our data for each of our calls, which is a lot cleaner than having to chain or nesting our code. So we don't need to nest our code, but one even bigger win is the error handling. So finally we can try and catch our synchronous and asynchronous errors with the same try-catch clause. So let's take a look at what that really means with an example. So imagine we return some data here that isn't really valid JSON. So let's switch back now to the old-fashioned way without the async calls. Now we won't be able to do the await there. Instead, we're gonna need to first of all try to handle if the HTTP call goes wrong. So we're gonna need to put this in a try catch. Right, so let's catch errors if something go wrong here, and let's log it. And if that went good, we're gonna need to chain up our success method here that will get the result. And now we want to parse our JSON in here, like we did earlier. But this time, this will fail because we are returning some invalid JSON. So if we went ahead and just called JSON parse and passed in our result here, which contains invalid JSON, now this will throw, but we won't catch it in the following catch statement. And let's just demo that before we move on further. So we call foo, and foo will try to call fetch, which will go good, which we'll be able to get, but we'll get some invalid JSON back here. And let's see what happens. Right, so something went wrong and we didn't handle the promise, so or we didn't handle the reject promise. So how come it really looks like we did, but this catch really only catches if something went wrong in the fetch method, right? But didn't catch the error in the parse method. So to be able to catch that, we're gonna need to go ahead and chain up the catch method here. And let's run this now instead. Let's give ourselves a little bit more space. We can see our actual error here, that we had an unexpected character in our JSON data. So as we can see, this gets really messy to handle. Of course, I could go ahead and handle this call as well, but you can see the readability isn't good at all, even though I'm not really trying now. But we can see how this gets a lot easier, but just using the async and await call. So instead of needing to have two separate catches here, now let's go ahead and mark this first method as async again, which makes it awaitable. And now we can let our result equal fetch. Instead of parsing in the then method there, we can go ahead and let parsed data equal JSON parse of the result. And before we run this, let's actually make sure to go ahead and call await on this fetch method and mark our method as async. And now if we run our code, we will still get an error, but now we can see that we will handle everything with the same try and catch. So we don't need to nest these guys, which is really neat. So now you can see still we have, let's make this a bit bigger. So we still get an unexpected format here, but we're handling all the errors in the same try and catch. So that's really awesome. And while we are on the subject of errors, if we were to chain a lot of promises, we don't really know where something went wrong when using promise-based asynchronous operations. So let's take a look at that next. Let's go ahead and remove the async keywords here. And instead of awaiting that result here, we're gonna go ahead and call. We're not gonna do anything with result. We're just gonna go ahead and call fetch again. And we're gonna do this a couple of times really. And just to make this demo more purposeful, let's not throw an error here. So a lot of these calls or each call will go through, but at the end we want to throw a new error here. Whoops. So we know that these guys went just fine, but then something goes wrong. So let's take a look at how the stack trace looks for this guy. So let's just give ourselves a little bit more space and call. Right, and now of course we're gonna need to once again handle, let's chain up the catch method. Let's just copy paste this guy here. Not really the best place to copy paste from. Right, now let's call our code. Right, and of course for this to work we're actually gonna need to return our promise. So let's clear the screen and do it once again. And now we can see that we got the error whoops, but then our error stack looks really strange. So we can see that we called fetch, and then we have a then and then and then and a then function. So it looks like it has something to do with a fetch method, but fetch is really totally innocent of this error, right? Because the error is thrown in the foo method, which is just chained as a success. You can see the code for yourselves. So the foo method is actually the bad guy here and not the fetch method. Except that in our success method here we are throwing an error, right? So it's really misleading. And so let's see how this gets better with the async and await keywords. And so instead of needing to return the promise here, as I almost missed, we can go ahead and let's mark these as async again. Instead of returning that, you can just go ahead and await these guys. Now we don't need this try catch. We didn't really need it earlier either. Just to make this clear, so we can go ahead and await a lot of methods, a lot of calls here. Let's pretend these are service calls, but then after these calls, let's go ahead and throw. So basically the same, or it really is the same scenario as previously, and let's see what this gives us instead. So now we can see on from the stack trace that the method that threw was foo, and it gives us exactly on which line. So line 14 was the bad guy here, and this was something that we just couldn't read from the previous stack trace by chaining these methods in success callbacks. Alright, so to summarize, this was kind of not really planned screencast here, but I'm hoping you guys could pick something up from this anyways. I hope you could see that our code got a lot more, we actually wrote a lot less code to do the same things, and it made more sense. So instead of nesting our code, we get more readable and maintainable code, or really more straightforward code by using the async and the await keywords. And this is something we are really getting used to in the C# world, and I'm really excited to see this come to the JavaScript world as well. So I'm really excited about these functions. So instead of nesting our codes, we can simply just call our asynchronous methods, and the error handling is a lot less a pain in the ass now. We can see we can handle asynchronous and synchronous errors with the same try catch clause, which is a big win, and we get much cleaner stack traces when something actually does go wrong. So I hope you guys enjoyed this screencast, and if you like what I do, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And until next time, as always, have a nice day, guys. Bye.